Lieutenant Ruth Coleman pushed open the supply room door. Shelves stacked floor to ceiling with penicillin, more than she had seen in 2 years of field hospitals. A German prisoner limped past the window outside. Blood soaked through his bandage. Footsteps echoed down the hallway behind her, American voices getting closer. 6 hours earlier, the convoy had crossed into Texas. 3 trucks carrying the 761st Battalion nurses, all women, all black, Fort Clark prisoner of war camp. The orders had been clear: medical support for captured enemy combatants, nothing more. The dust settled as Coleman stepped down from the truck. The heat hit like a wall. August 1944. The war in Europe raged on. Here, barbed wire surrounded neat rows of barracks, guard towers at each corner. German voices drifted across the yard. Major Anderson waited at the gate. White, 50s, his uniform pressed sharp despite the heat. He did not salute. "You're late." "Road washed out near Austin, sir. Your quarters are separate, east side of the camp." Coleman's jaw tightened. Separate, always separate. The other nurses filed out. 12 women total. Dorothy Hayes, Patricia Morgan. The youngest, Sarah Franklin, barely 22. They had trained together in Alabama, lived through the same segregated hell. Now this. Anderson turned without another word. They followed. Past the German barracks. Past the mess hall where white medics ate lunch. Past the main infirmary. Finally, a small building at the camp's edge, paint peeling, windows cracked. "This is it?" Anderson's face stayed blank. "You'll make do." Inside, 12 cots, 1 bathroom, no running hot water. Hayes dropped her bag on a cot. The frame groaned. "Welcome to Texas," she muttered. Coleman walked to the window. Across the yard, the main infirmary stood 3 times larger. New construction. Fresh paint. 2 white nurses walked out carrying clipboards. Neither glanced their direction. "Lieutenant," Franklin stood in the doorway, "they want us in the medical building." The supply room had been Coleman's first stop. A white sergeant named Phillips showed them the inventory. His tone was mechanical, no warmth, no acknowledgement. Penicillin on the top shelf, sulfur drugs below, morphine in the locked cabinet. Only officers have keys. Coleman stared at the shelves. Hundreds of vials. Thousands. More than entire field hospitals in France had received. "This is all for the prisoners?" Phillips did not look at her. "Geneva Convention. Every POW gets the same medical treatment as our boys. And your boys. What about them? They get this much penicillin?" Phillips's expression hardened. "That's not your concern." He left. The door clicked shut behind him. Coleman stood alone among the supplies. She had watched men die in North Africa for lack of antibiotics. Good men. American soldiers. Black soldiers. Now enemy prisoners had access to medicine her own people could not get. The door opened. Hayes stepped inside. "You seeing this?" "I'm seeing it. Meanwhile, our brothers are dying in France because I know." Hayes picked up a vial, turned it in her hand. "This makes me sick. It makes me angry." Outside, a whistle blew. German prisoners lined up for afternoon roll call. Their uniforms were clean, fed well, protected by international law. Coleman thought of the letters from home. Her brother in the 92nd Infantry, fighting through Italy. His last letter had mentioned dysentery spreading through the unit. No supplies, no support. "Lieutenant Coleman?" A voice from the hallway. She turned. A white nurse stood in the doorway. Older, stern face, captain's bars on her collar. "Captain Winters, Chief Medical Officer." "Ma'am." Winters walked in. Her eyes swept the room, landed on Coleman. "You and your nurses will handle intake, physical examinations, basic wound care. Nothing critical." "Understood. The prisoners here are not to be coddled, but they will be treated fairly. Follow the protocols, no exceptions." "Yes, ma'am." Winters started to leave. stopped. "One more thing. You eat with your unit. Not with the white staff. Not in the main mess." Hayes stepped forward. "Ma'am, we're all... Those are the rules. Don't like them. File a complaint." She left. The silence that followed was heavier than the Texas heat. That afternoon, the first intake began. 20 new prisoners, freshly captured, transported from the East Coast. They shuffled into the examination room, dirty, exhausted, some injured. Coleman and her team worked methodically. Temperatures, blood pressure, check for wounds. Most of the Germans stayed silent. A few stared openly. One older prisoner, maybe 50, spoke in broken English. "You are nurses." Coleman did not look up. "Roll up your sleeve." "But you are..." "Roll up your sleeve." He complied. She checked his pulse. Strong. Steady, no fever. She moved to the next man. Hayes examined a younger prisoner. Shrapnel wound in his shoulder, 3 weeks old, infected. She cleaned it carefully. The prisoner winced, but did not cry out. "This needs penicillin," Hayes said. Coleman nodded. "I'll get it." She walked to the supply room. Phillips stood guard outside. "I need penicillin. Prisoner intake." He unlocked the door, followed her inside, watched as she took one vial. "Sign the log." She signed, her handwriting tight, controlled. Back in the examination room, Hayes administered the shot. The prisoner's shoulders relaxed, relief visible on his face. He muttered something in German. "Thank you, maybe." Franklin leaned close to Coleman. "Feels wrong." "What does?" "Saving them." Coleman understood. Every woman in this room understood. They had sworn oaths, taken vows to heal. But the men they treated had fought for Hitler, had killed American soldiers, maybe killed black soldiers, maybe killed men they knew. "We do our job," Coleman said quietly. "Nothing more." By evening, the intake was complete. The nurses returned to their quarters, exhausted, silent. Morgan heated water on a small stove for coffee. They sat together on the cots. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, Hayes broke the silence. "Anyone else notice the white nurses didn't touch a single prisoner?" "I noticed," Coleman said. "They get to supervise. We get to do the work." "That's always the way." Franklin stared at her hands. "My mama told me this uniform would mean something, that it would make a difference." "It does," Coleman said. "Just not the way we hoped." That night, Coleman lay awake. Through the window, she could see the main infirmary. Lights still on. White medics working late, probably treating American soldiers, probably using the best equipment, the best medicine. She thought of the German prisoner, the infected wound, the relief on his face after the penicillin. She had saved him, done her duty, followed her oath, but her brother was still in Italy, still fighting, still bleeding, and the question that kept her awake was simple. Who decided which lives mattered more? The answer, she knew, was the same as it had always been. Morning came too fast. The heat returned. So did the work. More prisoners arrived, more examinations, more treatments. The 761st nurses moved through their duties with quiet efficiency. But something had shifted. Coleman felt it. Hayes felt it. They all felt it. The uniforms they wore meant nothing here. The oaths they had taken were secondary to the color of their skin, and the enemies they healed received better care than their own brothers in arms. It was only the first day. The real test was still coming. The emergency bell rang at 0400 hours. Coleman jerked awake. 2 short blasts. Medical emergency. She was dressed in 90 seconds. The others followed. Outside, an ambulance idled near the main infirmary. White medics rushed past. No one looked at the black nurses running toward the building. Captain Winters stood at the entrance. Mass casualty, prison transport overturned. 12 wounded. You'll handle triage in the auxiliary room. The auxiliary room. Not the main trauma bay. Coleman bit back her response. "Yes, ma'am." Inside, the scene was chaos. German prisoners on stretchers. blood on the floor, shouting in 2 languages. The white medics worked in the main bay. Coleman's team was directed to a smaller room. Older equipment, fewer supplies. The first stretcher came through. Young prisoner, maybe 19. Compound fracture, left leg, bone visible through torn flesh. He screamed. "Morphine," Coleman ordered. Franklin prepared the syringe. Hayes steadied the prisoner. The injection went in. The screaming stopped, became whimpering. "We need to set this bone." Morgan grabbed the splints. Together they worked. Fast, efficient. The bone clicked back into place. The prisoner passed out. Shock, probably. Next patient. The second stretcher. Head trauma. Deep gash across the scalp. Blood matted in his hair. Coleman examined the wound. Skull intact. No fracture. But he needed stitches. 20, maybe 30. Suture kit. Hayes handed it over. Coleman worked quickly, each stitch precise. The prisoner's eyes stayed closed. Unconscious or sleeping, she could not tell. Third stretcher, burns, 2nd degree, right arm and shoulder. The smell hit first. Burned flesh. Gasoline. The prisoner's eyes were open, watching her. "SS," Hayes whispered. Coleman saw it. The tattoo. Blood type. Under the left arm. Standard for SS officers. The prisoner spoke. English, heavily accented. "You will not touch me." Coleman did not respond. She reached for the burn ointment. "I said, you will not touch me." Hayes stepped forward. "Shut your mouth." "I am an officer of the Reich. I will not be treated by—" Coleman grabbed his burned arm, hard. He howled. "You will be treated by whoever I assign. Understood?" His face twisted, pain and rage mixed together. But he nodded. She applied the ointment, wrapped the bandage, moved to the next patient. Behind her, Hayes muttered, "Should have let him burn." By dawn, 11 prisoners were stabilized. 1 died, massive internal bleeding. Nothing could have saved him. Coleman signed the death certificate. Time of death, 06:27 hours. Cause, traumatic injuries sustained in vehicle accident. The white medics never entered the auxiliary room. Not once. When the work was finished, Captain Winters appeared in the doorway. "Clean up. Report to my office at 800. She left before Coleman could respond. The nurses cleaned in silence. Blood, bandages. The smell of disinfectant failed to cover the smell of death. At 800, Coleman stood outside Winters's office. Alone. The others had returned to quarters. "Enter." Winters sat behind her desk. A white doctor stood beside her. Colonel Barnes, Chief of Medical Operations. "Lieutenant Coleman, sit." She sat. Barnes spoke first. "Your team performed adequately last night." "Adequately. 11 men saved, 1 lost. Adequately." "Thank you, sir. However, there was an incident. A prisoner filed a complaint." Coleman's jaw tightened. "The SS officer. He claims you assaulted him. I treated his burns. He was uncooperative." Winters leaned forward. "He says you grabbed his injured arm intentionally, caused unnecessary pain. He refused treatment. I had to secure compliance." Barnes crossed his arms. "The Geneva Convention requires humane treatment. I gave him humane treatment. I saved his arm. Your methods are being questioned." Coleman stood. "My methods are the same ones used by every field medic under fire. I did my job. Watch your tone, Lieutenant." "Sir, with respect, if that prisoner had been treated by a white nurse, would we be having this conversation?" Silence filled the room. Winter's voice dropped to ice. "You're dismissed." Coleman saluted, turned left. Outside, her hands shook, not from fear, from anger. Hayes waited by the quarters. "What happened?" "The SS officer filed a complaint." "Of course he did." "They're reviewing my methods." Franklin appeared from inside. "They're doing what?" "You heard me." Morgan stepped out. "That's insane. You saved his life." "Doesn't matter." Coleman sat on the steps. "We're black. He's white. Even as a prisoner, he has more protection than we do. The words hung in the air, true, undeniable, sickening. That afternoon, new orders arrived. The 761st nurses would handle all routine prisoner care, examinations, minor wounds, sick calls. The white medics would handle emergencies and complex cases. Translation, the dangerous work, the exhausting work, the work no one else wanted. That belonged to the black nurses. Hayes read the orders twice. "They're using us." "They always have been," Coleman said. "What do we do?" "What we always do. Our job." Days blurred together. Morning sick call, afternoon examinations, evening wound care. The German prisoners came in steady streams. Most were cooperative. A few were hostile. The SS prisoners always caused problems. One afternoon, Coleman treated a prisoner with pneumonia, weak, coughing, high fever. She administered sulfur drugs, checked his temperature every 4 hours. By the third day, he was recovering. He spoke to her in broken English. "Thank you." She did not respond. "My name is Ernst. I have children, 2 daughters." She continued checking his chart. "You saved my life. I am grateful." Coleman looked at him, really looked. He was maybe 35, thin, tired, human. "Where are your daughters?" "Germany. With my wife. If they are still alive." He said it without emotion, just fact. The war had taken certainty from everyone. Coleman finished her notes. "Rest. You'll be transferred back to your barracks tomorrow. You are a good nurse." She paused at the door. "I'm just doing my job." That night, Franklin asked the question they all thought. "Do you ever wonder about them? The prisoners. What about them? If they're good men, or if they're monsters?" Coleman considered. "I think they're both, same as anyone. But they fought for Hitler, and some of them probably had no choice." Hayes shook her head. "That's no excuse." "I didn't say it was. I'm just saying it's complicated." Morgan stood. "Nothing's complicated about Nazis." "Then why do we save them?" No one answered. The following week, a new batch of prisoners arrived, 50 men, fresh from the European theatre. Among them, a high-ranking officer, Oberst Heinrich Vogel, Luftwaffe, shot down over France. He walked into the examination room with his head high, arrogant, entitled. He wore his uniform like armor. Coleman approached. "Remove your jacket." "I require a physician." "I'm a nurse. Remove your jacket." "I will speak to your commanding officer." Hayes stepped forward. "You'll do what you're told." Vogel's eyes narrowed. "I am an officer of the German Luftwaffe. I have rights." Coleman's voice stayed level. "You have the right to medical examination. Remove your jacket or I'll have the guards remove it for you." He stared at her, calculating, then slowly unbuttoned his jacket. The examination revealed nothing serious. Minor bruises, slight malnutrition, standard for a prisoner. "You're cleared," Coleman said. Vogel put his jacket back on. "Your accent, you are American." "Obviously. But you are. Choose your next words carefully." He smiled, cold. "I find it curious. Your country fights for freedom. Yet here you are, treated as less than, even by your own people." Coleman's hand froze on her clipboard. "I have seen it. The white nurses do not eat with you, do not speak to you as equals. You work harder, receive less respect, and yet you fight for them." "I don't fight for them. I fight for my country." "Your country does not fight for you." Hayes moved toward him. "That's enough." Vogel ignored her, kept his eyes on Coleman. "In Germany, we are honest about our hierarchy. Here, you pretend equality exists, but it is a lie, and you know it. Get out." "The truth hurts, yes? Get out." 2 guards escorted him away, but his words remained. Poisonous. True. That night Coleman could not sleep. She replayed the conversation, every word, every implication. Vogel was right, about some of it. Not all, but some. The door creaked. Hayes entered, sat on the edge of Coleman's cot. "You okay?" No. He's trying to get in your head. He's already in my head. Hayes was quiet for a moment. Ruth, we can't let them divide us. That's what they want. Who? The Germans or our own officers? Both. Coleman sat up. Do you ever think about walking away? Every day. But you don't. No, because if we walk away, we prove them right. That we're not strong enough, not good enough, so we stay. We do the work, and we make them see us. Coleman wanted to believe that, wanted to think their presence mattered. But sitting in the dark, in a segregated barracks, treating enemy prisoners who received better medicine than black soldiers, belief was hard to hold. Hayes? Yeah? What if making them see us isn't enough? Hayes stood, walked to the door, turned back. Then we make them remember us. The words stayed with Coleman long after Hayes left. Make them remember. Not just see. Remember. Outside, a guard shouted orders. German voices responded. The camp never truly slept. Neither did Coleman. She lay awake until morning light crept through the window. Day 14 at Fort Clark. The heat continued. So did the work. So did the quiet rage that built in her chest with every passing hour. But something else was building too. Determination. The kind that did not bend. The kind that carried soldiers through impossible battles. Coleman did not know it yet, but in 3 days that determination would be tested in a way she could never have prepared for. The choice would be simple. Follow orders or save a life. Only one option led to court-martial, and only one option let her sleep at night. Coleman stood in the supply room, 2 vials of penicillin in her hand. Outside, voices rose, angry, German and English mixed together. Something was wrong. She pocketed the vials, signed the log. Phillips was not at his post. Strange. He never left the supply room unguarded. The voices grew louder. She walked toward the examination room, stopped at the doorway. Inside, Captain Winters faced off against Oberst Vogel. 2 guards stood between them. Vogel's face was flushed. Winters's jaw was set. I demand proper medical attention, Vogel said. You received medical attention. From them. He gestured toward Coleman. I require a qualified physician. Winters turned, saw Coleman. Lieutenant, what did you diagnose? Minor contusions, no serious injuries. Vogel stepped forward. She is lying. I have internal pain. Severe. Where? Here. He touched his abdomen, right side. Coleman knew immediately. Appendix. Maybe. Or manipulation. Vogel was smart. Too smart. Winters looked at Coleman. Examine him. Properly this time. Coleman entered the room, set her medical bag on the table. Lie down. Vogel complied, smiling slightly. She pressed his abdomen, right lower quadrant. He winced, pulled away. Does this hurt? Yes. She pressed again, harder. He did not react. And this? No. Rebound tenderness test. Negative. No appendicitis. He was faking. Captain, he's fine. You're certain? Completely. Vogel sat up. She is incompetent. I demand a real doctor. Winters's expression hardened. You'll get what you're given. Then I will file a formal complaint. With the Red Cross. The room went silent. Red Cross complaints meant investigations, paperwork, scrutiny, everything the camp command wanted to avoid. Winters turned to Coleman. Get Dr. Patterson, now. Coleman's hands clenched. Ma'am, he doesn't need... That's an order. She left. Found Dr. Patterson in his office. White, 60, chief physician. Sir, Captain Winters requests your presence. Patterson did not look up from his paperwork. For what? Prisoner examination. You can't handle it? The prisoner is demanding a physician. Patterson sighed, set down his pen. They always do. In the examination room, Patterson spent 5 minutes examining Vogel. Same tests, same results. Nothing wrong. He's fine, Patterson announced. Vogel's smile vanished. But the pain is psychological or fabricated. Patterson turned to Winters. "Your nurses are perfectly capable. Stop wasting my time." He left. Vogel stared at Coleman, pure hatred in his eyes. "This is not finished." The guards escorted him out. Winters faced Coleman. "Next time, be more thorough." "I was thorough." "Then be more convincing." She left before Coleman could respond. Hayes met her outside. "What happened?" "Politics." "Meaning?" "Meaning Vogel is playing games, and we're losing." That evening, a new patient arrived. American soldier, private first class, 92nd Infantry Division, transferred from a hospital in California. Shrapnel wounds, infected, critical condition. Coleman read his chart. Her breath caught. Name, Coleman David, her brother. She dropped the clipboard. Hayes caught it, read the name. Oh, God. Coleman ran to the infirmary, burst through the doors. White medics looked up, startled. "Where is he?" A nurse pointed. "Trauma bay, but you can't." Coleman was already moving. David lay on a gurney, unconscious. His left leg wrapped in bloody bandages, his face grey. Fever burned in him. She could see it from across the room. "Doctor." Patterson worked over him, checking vitals, his expression grim. Coleman approached. "Doctor." "You're not authorized in this room." "That's my brother." Patterson looked up, studied her face. "Lieutenant Coleman?" "Yes, sir." "He's in bad shape. Infection spread from the leg wound. We're doing everything we can." "What does he need?" "High-dose penicillin, immediate surgery, and luck." Coleman's mind raced. "How much penicillin do we have?" "Enough. For now." For now?" Patterson wiped his hands. "We're running low. Shipment got delayed. We're prioritizing American personnel." "What about the prisoners?" "They get standard doses, nothing more." Coleman looked at her brother, dying because supplies ran short, while German prisoners sat in clean barracks with full bellies and unlimited medicine. "Can I stay with him?" "No. Return to your quarters. We'll notify you of any changes." She did not move. "Lieutenant, that's an order." Hayes pulled her away, gently. "Come on." Outside, Coleman's legs gave out. She sat on the steps, head in her hands. "He's dying." "You don't know that." "I saw him. He's dying." Franklin and Morgan appeared. News traveled fast in the camp. "We heard," Morgan said quietly. "Is there anything we can do?" Franklin asked. Coleman looked up. "No, there's nothing any of us can do." That night she could not sleep. She paced the quarters, back and forth, back and forth. The others watched silently. At 200 hours, she made a decision. She left the barracks, crossed the yard. The guards were changing shifts, a brief window, 30 seconds maybe. She slipped into the supply room. Phillips's logbook sat on the desk. She flipped to the current page, scanned the entries. 20 vials of penicillin distributed today, 10 to the main infirmary, 10 to prisoner care. She moved to the shelves, counted the vials. 43 remained. Her hand reached for one. Stopped. Taking medicine without authorization was theft. Court-martial offense, dishonorable discharge, prison time. But her brother was dying. She grabbed 2 vials, pocketed them, started to leave. The door opened. Phillips stood there, flashlight in hand. He saw her, saw the empty space on the shelf. "Lieutenant Coleman." She said nothing. "Step outside." She complied. Phillips followed, closed the door, locked it. "Empty your pockets." Coleman pulled out the vials, held them in her palm. Phillips stared at them, then at her. "That's theft of military property." "I know." "You could be court-martialed." "I know." He was quiet for a long moment. "Who's it for?" "My brother, Private Coleman, 92nd Infantry. He's in the trauma bay." Phillips took the vials from her hand. "Go back to your quarters." "But now!" She left. Behind her, Phillips stood alone in the dark, the vials in his hand, the choice before him. Morning came. Coleman waited for military police to arrive. For the arrest. For the end of her career. Instead, Hayes burst through the door. "Your brother, he's awake." Coleman ran. The trauma bay was bright. Too bright. David lay propped up on pillows, pale but conscious. His fever had broken. Dr. Patterson stood beside him. "The infection is responding to treatment. He'll need another week here, but he should make a full recovery." Coleman's knees went weak. "Thank you." Patterson nodded, left them alone. David's voice was weak. "Ruth," she took his hand. "I'm here. They said you're stationed here." "Yeah. Treating Nazis? That's the job." He tried to smile, failed. "Funny, I got shot by Nazis. You saved them. I save everyone. Even the ones who did this?" He gestured to his leg. Coleman had no answer. David closed his eyes. "I'm glad you're here." "Me too." That afternoon, Phillips found her outside the infirmary. "Your brother received 4 vials of penicillin last night." Coleman's heart stopped. "Emergency authorization," Phillips continued. "Signed by Dr. Patterson. 2 vials from main supplies, 2 from prisoner stock." He handed her a paper. Official, stamped, legitimate. "You should file this for your records." He walked away before she could respond. Coleman stared at the paper. Phillips had covered for her, falsified the log, risked his own career. Why? She would never know. That evening, a new order came through. All prisoner medical care would be handled exclusively by the 761st nurses. No exceptions. White medics were reassigned to American personnel only. Hayes read it aloud. "They're dumping everything on us." "Of course they are," Morgan said. Franklin looked at Coleman. "What do we do?" Coleman thought of her brother, alive because someone broke the rules. She thought of Ernst, the prisoner with daughters. She thought of Vogel, still scheming, still demanding. "We do what we're trained to do. We save lives, even theirs, especially theirs." Hayes frowned. "Why?" "Because if we don't, we're no better than they are." The words felt true, but they also felt hollow. How many times could they be the bigger person? How many times could they swallow injustice and still call it honor? 3 days later, the test came. An emergency. Late afternoon. Prisoner transport crashed 15 miles outside camp. Multiple casualties. Critical injuries. All hands needed. The 761st nurses loaded into trucks, raced toward the scene. When they arrived, smoke still rose from the wreckage. Bodies lay scattered. German prisoners, American guards. The dividing line between friend and enemy erased by twisted metal and fire. Coleman jumped out. "Triage, now!" They moved fast, checking pulses, assessing wounds, prioritizing who could be saved. A German officer lay near the truck, both legs crushed, bleeding heavily. He was conscious, in shock. Coleman knelt beside him. "Can you hear me?" He nodded. She checked his pulse, thready, weak. He was dying. But 20 feet away, an American guard lay unconscious. Head trauma, bleeding from the ears, also dying. 2 men, 2 lives, 1 nurse. She could not save both. Hayes appeared beside her. "Ruth, we have to choose." Coleman looked at the German, then at the American. Protocol said treat Americans first, always. Her oath said treat whoever needed help most. The German's eyes found hers. "Bitte," he whispered. "Please." The American guard did not move, did not speak, but his chest rose and fell, barely. "Ruth," Hayes said again. "Choose." Coleman stood, grabbed her medical bag, and made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Coleman grabbed her bag, ran to the American guard. Hayes stared after her, shocked. The guard's pupils were unequal, brain hemorrhage. Minutes left, maybe less. She worked fast, cleared his airway, elevated his head, applied pressure to the wound. Blood soaked through her hands. Behind her the German officer moaned. The sound cut off abruptly. Hayes checked his pulse, shook her head. "He's gone." Coleman did not stop working, could not stop. The guard's breathing steadied, slightly. His color improved, barely. "Get a stretcher," Coleman ordered. Franklin and Morgan brought one. They loaded him carefully, rushed him to the waiting truck. Coleman stood, looked at the dead German, his eyes still open, still pleading. She closed them. The drive back was silent. 4 prisoners saved, 3 guards saved, 2 Germans dead, 1 American critical. Numbers, that's all it was, numbers. But the dead German's face stayed with her. At camp, Dr. Patterson met them. "Good work. The guard will make it." Coleman nodded, numb. "Lieutenant, a word." She followed him inside. His office was small, cramped. "You made the right choice." "Did I?" "You prioritized an American soldier. That's protocol." The German was closer. His injuries were treatable. Were they? Coleman hesitated. "Maybe. You followed your training. That's all any of us can do." But it did not feel like enough. That night, David asked about the crash. Coleman told him, most of it, not all. "You let a German die?" "I couldn't save both." "So you chose right." "Did I?" David was quiet. "Ruth, you can't save everyone." "I know." "Then stop trying." She wanted to. God, she wanted to. 2 days passed, routine returned, morning sick call, afternoon exams, evening wound care. The rhythm that kept them sane. Then the bell rang again, 1800 hours, emergency. Coleman was first to the infirmary. Captain Winters waited inside. Her face was stone. "German officer, critical condition, severe pneumonia. He needs immediate high-dose penicillin." "Which officer?" "Oberst Vogel." Coleman's stomach dropped. In the examination room, Vogel lay on a gurney. His breathing was shallow, labored. Fluid filled his lungs. Without treatment, he would die by morning. Dr. Patterson entered, checked the chart. "He needs 6 vials, immediately." "We only have 4, Winters said. 4 won't be enough." "Then use what we have." Patterson looked at Coleman. "Administer treatment." Coleman prepared the first injection. Vogel's eyes opened, unfocused, delirious. "They let you live," he whispered in German. She did not respond. Inserted the needle. Pushed the plunger, the second injection, the third, the fourth. Patterson checked his vitals. "Not enough. The infection is too advanced." "That's all we can spare," Winters said. "He'll die." "Then he dies." Coleman set down the empty syringe. "We have more penicillin." "Not for prisoners. We have 40 vials in the supply room, reserved for American personnel." "He's a human being." Winters stepped closer. "He's an enemy combatant. The Geneva Convention does not require us to deplete our own supplies." Coleman looked at Vogel. His breathing worsened, rattle in his chest, death approaching. "Captain, 2 more vials would save him." "My decision is final." Patterson cleared his throat. "I could authorize, you will do no such thing." Winters turned to Coleman. "Lieutenant, you are dismissed." Coleman did not move. "I said dismissed." "I heard you." "Then leave." Coleman looked at the supply room door, 20 feet away, unlocked. Phillips was off duty. She could do it. 2 vials. Save a life. Face the consequences. Or she could obey orders. Let Vogel die. Keep her career intact. Hayes appeared in the doorway, read the situation immediately, shook her head slightly. "Do not." Coleman thought of her oath. First, do no harm. She thought of her brother. Alive because someone bent the rules. She thought of the German at the crash site, dead because she made a choice. "Lieutenant Coleman," Winters said. "Final warning." Coleman walked toward the supply room. "Stop." She opened the door. "That's an order." She grabbed 2 vials from the shelf. "Lieutenant, stop right now." Coleman returned to the examination room, set the vials on the tray. Winters's face went white. "You just disobeyed a direct order." "Yes, ma'am. You stole military property." Yes, ma'am. Do you understand what you've done? Coleman filled the syringe. I understand perfectly. She administered the 5th injection, then the 6th. Vogel's breathing eased. Color returned to his face. The rattle in his chest quieted. He would live. Winters grabbed Coleman's arm. You're under arrest. 2 military police appeared, handcuffs ready. Coleman held out her wrists. The metal clicked shut. Cold, final. Hayes stepped forward. Captain, she saved his life. She violated military law. She followed her oath. Her oath does not supersede orders. Winters nodded to the MPs. Take her. They led Coleman outside, past the white medics, past the prisoner barracks, past her own quarters where Franklin and Morgan watched through the window, faces stricken. The holding cell was small. Concrete floor, metal cot, single-barred window. She sat, hands still cuffed, the reality settling in. Court-martial, dishonorable discharge, military prison, all for saving a Nazi officer who hated her. The door opened. Phillips entered. Alone. They sent me to process your arrest paperwork. Coleman said nothing. He unlocked her handcuffs. Off the record, you did the right thing. Doesn't feel right. It never does. He handed her a canteen. Your brother wanted you to have this. She drank. Water never tasted so bitter. What happens now? Court-martial in 3 days. Fort Sam Houston. They'll make an example of you. I know. Phillips stood to leave, paused. For what it's worth, I would have done the same thing. You already did. He smiled slightly. Yeah, I did. The door closed, locked. Coleman lay on the cot, stared at the ceiling. Outside, the camp continued. Guards changed shifts, prisoners ate dinner. The world kept turning. 3 days later, she stood before a military tribunal. 5 officers, all white, all men. The charges were read: theft of military property, disobeying a direct order, conduct unbecoming an officer. Captain Winters testified. Lieutenant Coleman willfully violated protocol. She prioritized an enemy prisoner over American military resources. Dr. Patterson testified. Lieutenant Coleman acted within her medical authority. Her actions were consistent with established care standards. David testified from a wheelchair. My sister saved my life. She saves lives. That's what she does. Hayes testified. Lieutenant Coleman is the finest nurse I've ever served with. She followed her oath. The tribunal deliberated for 2 hours. The verdict: guilty on all charges. The sentence: reduction in rank, 6 months confinement, dishonorable discharge upon release. Coleman stood at attention, showed no emotion. Inside, something broke, but before the gavel fell, a man entered the courtroom. Full colonel, uniform covered in ribbons. I request permission to address the tribunal. The presiding officer frowned. State your name and purpose. Colonel Benjamin Davis, Commander 332nd Fighter Group. I'm here on behalf of the War Department. Silence filled the room. Davis approached the bench. Gentlemen, this case has reached Washington. Secretary Stimson himself is reviewing it. On what grounds? The Negro press has covered Lieutenant Coleman's arrest extensively. So has the white press. This trial is now a public relations matter. The officers exchanged glances. Davis continued. The United States is fighting a war against fascism, against racial supremacy. Lieutenant Coleman is a black woman who saved a Nazi officer. That story is powerful. It shows our values. She broke the law. She followed the Geneva Convention. She followed her oath. And she made America look moral. The tribunal conferred quietly. Finally, the presiding officer spoke. In light of new information, this tribunal amends its ruling. Lieutenant Coleman will receive a letter of reprimand. No reduction in rank, no confinement. She will return to duty immediately. The gavel fell. Coleman stood stunned. Hayes grabbed her arm, steadied her. Outside the courtroom, Colonel Davis waited. "Lieutenant, sir, you caused a lot of trouble." "I'm sorry, sir." "Don't be. You did the right thing, even if it was the hard thing." "Thank you, sir. One more thing. The 761st Battalion is being transferred to Europe. You'll be treating American wounded. Your people." Coleman felt something lift from her chest. "When do we leave?" 2 weeks. She saluted. He returned it. Back at Fort Clark, the 761st nurses prepared for deployment. Their quarters were packed. Goodbyes were brief. Coleman made one final visit to the infirmary. Vogel sat up in bed, recovered, alert. He saw her. His expression shifted. Unreadable. "You saved me." "I did my job." "Why?" "Because that's what nurses do." He studied her face. "I was wrong about you." "About what?" "I said your country does not fight for you, but you fight for it anyway. That takes courage I do not possess." Coleman turned to leave. "Lieutenant?" She stopped. "Thank you." She did not respond, just walked away. The day they left, the camp assembled for formation. German prisoners on one side, American personnel on the other. Major Anderson addressed them, brief, formal. He did not mention Coleman by name, but everyone knew. The trucks rolled through the gates. Coleman looked back once, the barbed wire, the barracks, the infirmary where she had made the hardest choice of her life. "No regrets?" Hayes asked. "Plenty of regrets." "But you'd do it again." Coleman thought about that. "Yeah, I would." The 761st Battalion shipped to France in October 1944. They treated thousands of wounded soldiers, American, British, Free French. They worked in field hospitals under fire, saved countless lives. Coleman received a commendation for her service, later a Bronze Star. The letter of reprimand remained in her file. She never tried to have it removed. After the war, she returned to Texas, opened a clinic in Houston, treated anyone who came through her door, black, white, rich, poor, no exceptions. She never spoke publicly about Fort Clark, about the choice she made, about the Nazi officer she saved. But in 1963, during the civil rights movement, a reporter found her, asked about her military service. "Is it true you were court-martialed for saving a German prisoner?" "Yes." "Do you regret it?" Coleman was quiet for a long moment. "I regret that I had to choose. I don't regret who I chose to be." "What do you mean?" "I mean compassion is not conditional. You don't save only the people who look like you, or think like you, or fight for you. You save everyone, because the moment you stop, you become what you're fighting against." Those words were published in newspapers across the country, black and white, north and south. In 1965, Coleman received a letter, postmarked from Germany. Inside was a photograph, an elderly man, 3 women, 7 children. On the back, handwritten in English, "My daughters, my grandchildren, they exist because you chose mercy over hate. Thank you. Heinrich Vogel." Coleman kept that photograph on her desk until she died in 1989. The 761st Battalion nurses were never fully recognized during their lifetimes. No parades, no monuments. Their story was buried under decades of segregation and silence. But they had proven something. That humanity transcends race, that compassion transcends conflict, that the hardest choices define who we are. Ruth Coleman chose to save a life. It cost her career, her rank, her reputation. But it proved that even in war, even under the worst circumstances, mercy can survive. And maybe that is worth more than any medal.